Eric is a transportation specialist, and Patrick is a program director for Cross County Connection. Eric and Patrick both went to the Blaustein School at Rutgers for city and regional planning. I actually met Patrick there. And Patrick is a licensed professional planner and an AICP certified planner. So I'll let Eric get started and tell you more about Cross County Connection and what they do. Thanks, Eric.
Sure. John, it says the screen sharing is disabled, so I don't know if you want to share the slides.
Yep, I can do that. Just give me a second here.
Let's see. Are you able to share, John? Eric, are you able?
Yeah, I am. I just have to get the right window up here.
Because I think it might be accessible to you now.
Okay. Yeah, see if you can share, Eric. Otherwise, I can keep.
Yeah, I'm able to do it now.
Okay. All right.
Let me see this. Okay, can you all see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Eric Derrer, as John said, and I'm an associate transportation specialist at Cross County Connection. I'm going to talk a little bit about complete streets in South Jersey and how, you can see more complete street strategies or, implement complete streets policy in Medford. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about Cross County Connection. We cover the 7 South Jersey counties, including Atlantic, Camden, Gloucester, Cumberland, Salem, and Cape May counties. We provide technical planning services to municipalities throughout the region, and this includes Complete Streets technical assistance. So this will include Complete Streets implementation, grant assistance, and policy guidance and development for any Complete Streets policies. So what are Complete Streets? Complete Streets are designed to provide safe travel options for all users of the roadway, including bicyclists, pedestrians, people with disabilities, older individuals, transit riders, motor vehicles, and delivery drivers. There are many benefits to this a roadway that is designed for all users, including improved safety, economic opportunity, improved public health, and the building of a sense of community, as you have more space for kind of social interaction when you have more space for pedestrians and bicyclists and other roadway users other than cars. So to get complete streets strategies implemented in your town, you need a complete streets policy, or it helps to have a complete streets policy. And a complete streets policy or ordinance is an official document approved by the governing body that ensures roadway design considers all users. There are currently 40 policies in South Jersey, and they vary in strength. And I'm going to go through a good example of a policy in South Jersey later on in this presentation. So in 2019, NJDOT released the Complete and Green Streets model policy, and it focused on new elements for complete streets in New Jersey, including a focus on equity, which means providing complete streets elements for underrepresented individuals within different townships, and the use of green infrastructure for stormwater runoff. And it also focused on the use of methods such as complete streets checklists and complete streets advisory boards, which would lead to more implementation of complete streets policies. So at its core, when you think about complete streets, you're thinking about reallocating the width of the roadways to include more spaces for other roadway users other than cars. And we've seen a lot of this during COVID, as different townships and municipalities have closed off portions of the roadway for more pedestrians, for outdoor spaces and social distancing and outdoor dining and things of that like. So during normal times, you could also do this if you look at a roadway and you see that there's a roadway width or lane width of 15 feet where you could really, get by with a roadway width of 10 feet, you have extra space to reallocate on the street. So, a good exercise to do is think about how you'd like to reallocate street space within your town. You could provide spaces for entertainment, safe crossing for pedestrian, meeting spaces, or even, spaces for bicyclists. Many different things you could do with the extra roadway space when you think about how to reallocate it for all roadway users. And when you think about complete streets, especially in South Jersey, context is important. South Jersey is made up of rural, suburban, and urban landscape, and a complete streets in these settings will look very different depending on where you are. So this is an example in Townsend, Montana, of what could be considered a complete street in a rural area. It provides a shoulder space for walking and biking that has a buffer in between the cars. So this area may not get much pedestrian volume, and this might be all they need to provide for the bicyclists and pedestrians in the region. So a complete street in a township like Collingswood or Camden could look very different than a complete street, this example of a complete street. Also, when you're thinking about complete streets, you don't always need to reallocate the space of a roadway. You could also think about the idea of slowing cars down. This involves traffic calming measures such as speed bumps or speed tables to allow for bicyclists and pedestrians to feel more comfortable when they're walking and biking. So if you have a roadway with, that's pretty narrow, you could kind of, add, you don't have to reallocate space on the street, but you could add traffic calming measures to make it more comfortable for walking and biking. So what can Medford do to see more complete streets in your town? A good step would be to review the current complete streets policy and improve it to lead to more implementation of complete streets in the township. So you can engage the public in this process and really go through exercises to figure out what Medford wants to see in their town regarding complete streets. You could also look through the 2019 model policy and decide what elements of the policy are important to Medford, and you can apply those pieces to an updated policy as you go through. Another great resource to look at would be the 2017 NJDOT Complete Streets Design Guide. This provides a lot of guidance of different safety countermeasures or roadway improvements for all different contexts of roadways, including urban, suburban, and rural. So it would be a great example of looking at, you could look at this guide and determine what kind of elements you want to see on your street space to and include that in the policy when you're looking to update it. So as I said before, there are many different elements of a complete street policy that would make a strong policy. And the policies within New Jersey vary in strength all across the board. So some important elements to include in a complete street policy would include equity, include an equity element, and this would include the development of complete streets that benefit underrepresented group. It's important to include a complete streets checklist. And this is a checklist that could be used by the township engineer or the municipal engineer when doing routine roadway resurfacing that would require them to think about complete streets and think about how they could reallocate the street space as they're doing these projects. So we'll make them consider ideas such as existing streetscape and existing plans and where the existing plans would require bicycle lanes or pedestrian infrastructure and things like that. So another important element would be to require performance measures and track different complete streets development within the township. So it's important to keep track of that and measure development as it comes along. It would be important to include green infrastructure elements in a policy and other elements that ensure implementation, such as a complete streets advisory board, which would be formulated of a diverse group of residents and officials to include the public in the process of complete streets development. In addition to that, it's important to include economic opportunity elements such as placemaking and roadway signage. You could do this in downtown Medford. So you could, include placemaking in the development of complete streets to add economic opportunity for walkers and bikers. So a good example of a policy in South Jersey is Upper Township. They recently completed their policy, updated their policy in 2019, and they included a lot of elements in the Complete and Green Streets model policy. So some of the elements that they included in their policy included the establishment of a complete streets advisory board. So they explicitly said in their policy that we're going to establish a complete streets advisory board with a wide range of citizens and include them in the process of developing complete streets in our township. It also calls for measurable program reporting. So this includes elements like tracking the linear feet of new pedestrian infrastructure, the number of new street trees, and bicycle and pedestrian counts. So those are some of the elements that they want to track as they track development of complete streets in their township. It also called for the adoption of a complete streets checklist and coordination between jurisdiction. So two really important pieces that this policy included were the complete streets checklist and the complete streets advisory board. So once these two things are implemented in Upper Township, it will lead to more implementation of the policy, which is an issue that some municipalities have, is they put the policy in place, but they never see any implementation of the policy. So one way to kind of ensure this would be the advisory board or the complete streets checklist. It would ensure that the officials are looking at the policy more than they would be if they weren't in there. So all of these programs and strategies for complete streets, such as curb bumps outs, speed tables, any traffic calming measures, they cost money. So there are several funding opportunities for the complete streets projects and other projects throughout New Jersey at the state and local level. So one of the bigger ones is the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program, or the TA Set-Aside Program. And this provides funding for non-traditional surface transportation projects, including bikeways, rail to trails, and different quality of life improvements. So a lot of the strategies and different projects that you could include in the TA Set-Asides program would be considered complete streets projects. So this grant happens on a biannual basis, and though this cycle has passed for this time, this is a good time to start thinking about where you'd like to see different complete streets projects in Medford, and preparing for the next cycle to start preparing the grant application, because this grant is very competitive. And at Cross County Connection, we are able to help we are able to help with the grant application process and prepare you so you can have a strong grant application. As you know, like a lot of federal grants are very competitive, so it's definitely hard to get. Another program is the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant Program. And this program aims to enable and encourage students in grades kindergarten through 8 to walk and bike to school, and includes students with disabilities. So some of the programs available or projects that you could do under this includes facilities planning, development, and implementation of projects. This grant is also on a biannual basis, and Cross County Connection is very involved in the Safe Routes to School program altogether, on the infrastructure side and non-infrastructure side. So we help start an infrastructure program that could help you land grants, including a school travel plan, starting a Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program, and making sure your municipality has different requirements met, including school travel tallies and letters of support, which you need when you're ready to apply for this grant. So Patrick's going to go into this a little more, but there is the Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure grant program. At the federal level and state level, NJDOT is required to dedicate 10% of the Safe Routes to School funding to non-infrastructure programs. So, and establishing a Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure program with Cross County Connections improves your chances of receiving a grant. So some of the non-infrastructure programs include in-person and virtual programs like bike safety presentations, virtual pedestrian safety classes, outdoor safety classes, bicycle rodeos, and helmet fittings. And all of these programs are meant to, increase the confidence of students who want to bike and walk to school, and also, provide, teach them the different ways of safe biking and walking. So these are just some of the programs we've been able to do during COVID. We've really adapted our programs to meet the needs of the schools as they're, dealing with COVID and any other different things that come along with that. We've done outdoor helmet fittings. We've done bicycle rodeos outdoor. We've done helmet giveaways and many other virtual pedestrian safety classes. So including what I just went through, there are many other resources and different guides available to help you develop complete streets policies and complete streets projects in your township. A great example of this is the Sustainable Jersey's Complete Streets Action. They've actually just updated this action, so this is a good time to really look at your complete streets policy and get some more sustainable Jersey points by going through and updating your complete streets policy. There's the New Jersey Bike and Walk Coalition, the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, South Jersey Bicycle and Pedestrian Funding Guide, which Cross County Connection has, and this provides information on grants that I talked about, including and other grants that will help fund bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And it includes tips and different strategies to have a strong grant application. There's also the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, the MPO for Medford, and Betsy's going to talk a little more later on about the programs that they have relating to complete streets. Then Patrick, go into the Street Smart program.
All right. You covered most of Safe Routes, so I probably won't have too much more to say on that, but thank you. Thanks, Eric. So I'm Patrick Farley. I'm the program director at Cross County Connection TMA. Eric mentioned some of the services we offer. I just want to provide a little additional information on that. So we're a Transportation Management Association. Every county in New Jersey is assigned a Transportation Management Association. Eric mentioned we're the only one for South Jersey. What that means is that the services we're talking about today are largely free. Pretty much everything we're talking about today, we provide free of charge to local municipalities and green teams. That is because we receive federal and state funding to provide these programs and really help communities become more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. Another thing I'd like to add is that Eric mentioned some grant programs to fund some of the bigger, heavier lift stuff, like, traffic calming involves generally sometimes moving curbs and things like that, and that can get expensive. One of the most powerful things that a complete streets policy does is it makes it routine for when you're doing any sort of roadway project to think about the needs of bicyclists and pedestrians, people with disabilities. So a lot can be done with paint through your routine resurfacing program. It doesn't take, that's not nearly as expensive. So that's what we call the low hanging fruits. That's a great way to get started and slowly incrementally building out your network. And then you use that grant funding to go tackle those projects that you know you want to do. You just don't have the money within your typical municipal budget to get it done. And then I also want to say, Medford was actually one of the first towns in, not only in South Jersey, but in all of the state to adopt a complete streets policy. I know it's been a while. Policies have come a long way. A lot of them back then weren't really as strong as they could be, simply usually taking the form of a resolution of support. And those can languish if the township committee or a township administrator who was the champion of a complete streets policy is either not reelected or has moved on. So it's good. It's a really good opportunity now to be thinking about updating the Medford policy. I believe it is about 10 years old or maybe 11 years old. Yeah, so that's kind of why it's really opportune right now to be talking about this kind of issue. I'm talking about a little bit about our other programs that are centered more around non-infrastructure, education programs, and encouragement activities and things like that. A while back, we've talked about DVRPC a lot, and Betsy will talk to you about DVRPC. They're fantastic, and they did this really awesome series last year on building a culture of traffic safety. And that's kind of where these programs kind of make everything come full circle. So Complete Streets is a way to build that culture within your actual municipal government and within your municipal staff. They are going to be routinely thinking about ways to improve bicycle pedestrian safety, and that gets them on board. We have some other programs, one being Street Smart. Street Smart is a program that we partner with local police departments to do pedestrian safety education. Can you guys slide, Eric? Sorry. So basically, yeah, we work with police departments, and it's not a difficult process. It's really a lot of just distributing materials, being visible in the community for the police, and just showing that they're on board with creating this culture of traffic safety, and less so on enforcing, jaywalking and things like that. Like letting the community know that they're here to provide information so that people have the right skills to be safe. And this includes providing information to motorists. Largely, it is information to motorists on how they can be safer drivers operating around pedestrians. So this is a program we provide for free, generally involves some data collection on our end. We do some observations to see motorist and pedestrian behavior at targeted locations that we've identified as concerning within the municipality. We submit a technical memo to the police department and the municipality. And based on that, they take a look, and then we decide where are these target locations that we're going to go to and what method should we do. So methods can include just simply hanging posters in local stores, but can also include outreach to local businesses and community groups and churches, and have presentations to kind of bring them up to speed on issues that might be occurring in the town and get them on board as champions for pedestrian safety. And then you can do enforcement activities. They are optional, but these enforcement activities usually take the form of pedestrian decoys. What those are is police officers, plainclothes police officers will walk in a crosswalk, and then they'll give basically safety information to motorists who don't stop for pedestrians. Generally, it's just information and like a warning, like, hey, just so you know, this is the state law. you've got your warning. You know, in the future you can get a ticket because it's deadly serious, and that's kind of what the point is. Most campaigns that we do don't really have this component. They just provide the information to motorists when they're able to, and provide information to pedestrians. And we tend to set up sometimes in areas that have a lot of pedestrian traffic, because you know you can reach pedestrians that way, but you also can reach motorists. People are getting in their cars. And then we go out, we do follow-up observations, and we submit a report, basically to see how effective it was. And this is also a great opportunity. Next slide, please, Eric. So here's some of the methods as we talked about. There's all sorts of print materials. There's posters, banners, even like for restaurants, there's like drink coasters and tent cards that you can put on the table. We provide assistance with crafting social media messaging, setting up press events, reaching out to local newspapers on behalf of the municipality. There's a whole website there, bstreetsmartnewjersey.org, where you can get every bit of information you would ever need to start a program, but we would be here to help the police department and the municipality kind of go through the steps. Next slide. Here's what I was going to get to. So often we tie in another one of our programs with Street Smart. If we find concerning locations in your municipality, we will offer a bicycle pedestrian safety audit. These generally are focused on a small, like maybe 1 or 2 intersections, or a small like stretch of road, like say for instance downtown Medford. Those are ideal locations for our typical kinds of audits. And we just basically, we'll go out, we'll take a look at what we think is wrong, we'll give a presentation, and then we'll take everybody on a walk and kind of point out, and we can have a conversation in the field. People from the town can share what their experiences are, and we just kind of come to a consensus on where the issues are. And then we share kind of ideas on what we think could help address those issues. And then we prepare a report, and municipalities typically will use these reports to apply for some of those funding programs that we talked about earlier. Next slide, please. So Eric mentioned the Safe Routes to School program. He covered it in pretty good detail. In terms of the perspective of kind of this idea of building a culture of safety. So we've now gone through the municipality, we've gone through your police department, we're involving the public. This is how you get to the children and engage them early in understanding how to be safe bicyclists and pedestrians, and hopefully teaching them skills that last a lifetime by encouraging them to walk and bike, making them want to be pedestrians and bicycling advocates well into the future. So Eric provided a lot of the info on the programming we use. We adapted everything to suit a COVID-19 environment. So what used to be an in-class presentation for pedestrian safety is now a virtual presentation, or we have created just a short curriculum to go along with videos that we provide to teachers. They can just use the video to help teach the kids some pedestrian safety. We have quizzes that they can then follow up with. In the summer, the warmer weather, we also do the bike safety presentation, but we'll do it outside. And this will usually include a helmet fitting as well. We're creating a program that's going in to effect this spring, is a drive-by helmet fitting. And this way there could be limited interaction with the parents and the children. They simply give them a tape measure, they measure their child's head, they take a piece of paper, they write it down, and we drop the helmet in their trunk. That's the way that works. We do free helmet giveaways to police departments that are interested. Those helmets can just be, they can just take them and do what they want to give them away, but we can also arrange them to do an in-person helmet fitting, and then arrange what is known as a bike rodeo. We partner with police departments to do this as well. This is where they set up little stations where they teach, it's kind of like an obstacle course where they teach different elements of how to ride a bike safely to children. They've been very successful. We've done them with Willingboro, Edgewater Park, Palmyra, Collingswood. This is just within the last year. So it's been a pretty popular event during the pandemic because you're outside. And another program that we've really had a lot of success with. It's been difficult getting into the schools, obviously, and they have a lot on their plate with constant shifting landscape. But a program that's been like really warmly received is our Golden Sneaker Walking Challenge. We issue pedometers to the schools to share with the kids, and then they engage in a competition. It could be a week, it could be a month, where generally classes will compete against each other, or in a situation where you have, multiple elementary schools like a Medford Lakes or Medford has, the schools will compete against each other. And basically everybody gets a prize at the end. We don't really want to isolate, but there's announced a winner, and it's a lot of fun. And what we're finding is the schools really like this programming where the kids get active because they're having so much screen time. They don't really need another program necessarily where they're in front of a screen. So it gets them outside, which we know is a safer environment. It gets them moving. Exercise might be a little tough, not the kids aren't going out and buying Pelotons like their parents. So they need some way to get out there and get active. Next slide, please. So mentioned all of this. Basically, this is what's going on. We have information we can share with everybody if they're interested that they can share with the schools or parents. Some flyers that kind of advertise our program. Our website advertises that program. I can have Eric share those materials with Jonathan, and he can forward them to you. And the other thing I want to say is this program, we send home a lot of the information with the student in hopes that the parents see it as well. And also we teach the kids, especially the older kids, what the driving responsibilities are as well, so that either they remember them when they go on to be drivers, but also so that they can be kind of backseat drivers and tell their parents when they're kind of, violating some of the laws, like, hey, there was somebody wanting to cross there and you didn't stop for them. Did you know that's against the law? That kind of thing. So we're teaching them to kind of let their parents know what are the rules of the road as well. All right, next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. That's what I have. Those are two of kind of examples of our education programs. One's aimed at adults, one's aimed at children. And it's really just about being comprehensive in the approach, not only addressing the infrastructure, but doing that education and also encouraging, especially the kids, to get out and walk and bike. So thank you all for having me. That kind of sums up the basics of what we do, but there's a lot more that we have to offer once the town gets working with us, and we can always explore other needs. And one of the big things that we do is we really like to help towns get on the path to getting funding getting grant applications and getting funding. So that's a big service that a lot of towns really like to use from us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Patrick and Eric. There's a question about Medford Lakes. Medford Lakes is a borough within Medford Township, and it's very, it is a biking community, as Linda mentioned in the question here. Kids bike all over the place in Medford Lakes, and Linda's asking, aside from, all right, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yep.
So other than things like crossing guards and speed limit enforcement and having low speed limits, are there other things that, what other things can be done, I think is the question.
First off, I would say that
safer.
Medford Lakes is one of the best examples of that you don't necessarily need to put bike lanes and sidewalks to be a bicycle and pedestrian friendly community. I really miss living there. I lived on my BMX bike, basically, when I lived in Medford Lakes. It was fantastic. Narrow streets is the biggest thing that they have going for them. What I say that could possibly be improved is more signs that kind of provide wayfinding to help people navigate the town. Maybe more signs and pavement markings that remind people that bicyclists will be on the road. And there are a couple roads that are wide enough that could accommodate bike lanes or pedestrian paths. And I already know that Medford Lakes has applied for funding programs to do that. But I can't give you too many concrete things because we would actually need to do kind of an assessment, but those are kind of the general things. And a safe routes to school program would be a fantastic thing. And just basically those kinds of things. They can maybe do more bike events even for adults, tie in a bike event to your canoe carnival or something like that. But generally they're doing it well. And I think that the reason why they're doing it well is the town was built long before we started encouraging 15-foot travel lanes. Every car needs to have enough space to travel at 40 miles an hour on a residential street. The yield street is one of the most powerful tools that you can have to encourage safe driving.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Has things to talk about too. But so Matt Ludwig is an engineer at NV5. Matt is actually a licensed professional engineer and an AICP certified planner. And Matt works and manages projects, design and planning of projects including urban streets, greenways, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure projects. And he's worked in the consulting field for 13 years, I believe. So he has a lot of experience with the issues that we are talking about here. And he's also a cyclist and a runner. So I will hand it over to you, Matt.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, so I'm just going to go real quick through the process of how you get from idea to ribbon cutting for anything that has to deal with active transportation. So I think the focus of tonight, of course, is complete streets, and we're thinking about bicycle and pedestrian networks. So, the first thought, everyone here tonight, I think, has an idea. They want to see a complete streets network throughout the township, and one of the things that Betsy was going to talk about in her presentation, and I hope we can get her back and get that presentation up after me, but she's going to talk about level of traffic stress and how, most of the neighborhood streets that folks here live on are probably low stress type of streets, but the impediment is the higher volume, higher speed streets that typically connect neighborhoods to business districts and places where people work, places that people want to connect to. So that's really where a plan comes into play. So the plan that's done by a firm such as ours, what we're looking at is a variety of things, thinking about the current built environment and how we can make those transitions into streets that have bike lanes that bike lanes can be added, or sidewalks can be added, shared use paths. But we're also taking a look at streets that could use some traffic calming methods. So this is a rendering on the right side of the screen that you see, where it's called a neighborhood greenway, and it's used in particular in a street that we may not have the ability to geometrically add bike lanes in, either due to narrow widths or other factors, but it uses a lot of signage and pavement marking. It uses traffic calming elements to be able to get people to slow down. The Dutch call this a feeststraat, and what feeststraat means is that the car is a guest, that the street is actually converted in or designed to allow for the safe passage of bicyclists and pedestrians, but cars are still allowed to use that street, more so in a secondary manner. One example that I like to use in a suburban setting is prior to working here in the Philadelphia and South Jersey area, I worked in the North Carolina market. And this is an aerial image of Cary, North Carolina. So Cary is a suburb of Raleigh. And what they did a long time ago is that they planned out their trails network prior to all these neighborhoods getting built out. And as these neighborhoods grew and as the suburb built out, the developers were generally liable to install these segments of trail depending on where they were at. And so you not only see the trunk of the trail line running along the creek, this is the White Oak Creek Trail, but you also see these small little connectors in green that go into each little neighborhood. So if you lived in the neighborhood on the southern part of the screen and were going to some friends in the northern part of the screen, you could easily take the low stress streets to connect to the trail network. And then that would bypass you from having to get on those busier, higher stress streets and then connect into the low stress network of another neighborhood. So when you take a look at this specific area, you've got you've got your home in one area, you've got the school on the eastern part of the map there, so kids can easily ride to school because the school is located on the trail route. And then there's even the shopping area kind of towards the northwest corner there, where the grocery store and other commercial businesses are located. So What's not on the map is the Research Triangle Park, which is actually just a few miles to the northwest of here, also connected by the Greenway route. So the planning that goes into this is really great, you know, to be able to connect these little islands of low stress streets together with a multi-use path is really a great thing. So those are the kind of things that we're looking at during bicycle and pedestrian mobility plan, is how we can leverage those low stress streets and make those connections. I'll paste this website in the Zoom once we're done here, just so folks can take a look at it, at a good example of a master plan we've recently completed for Heightstown Borough, a little bit to the north of you. But this gives you an idea of what the content would go involved in. So it's not only looking at the network, but this one in particular, we looked at some trouble intersections within the borough and conceptually came up with some ideas of how these intersections could be improved. Because that's where a lot of the problems occur with networks, is at the intersection. That typically is the most dangerous part of the network. After the bicycle and pedestrian plan, or sometimes called the mobility plan, is completed, then it's really starting to look at how individual segments break down. So sometimes a feasibility study is completed, especially if it's for an individual trail project. And what that does is it gets you from that kind of high level mapping effort where you're just drawing lines on the map to say you want to connect neighborhood A to neighborhood B. The feasibility study takes that down another level and looks at the physical constraints such as wetlands, and it helps you put together an accurate cost of the project, so that really helps you prepare for the engineering phase of the project, and gets you accurate construction costs so you can kind of prepare for those grant funding stages. So after the feasibility study is completed, then you move into the more detailed engineering, permitting, and right-of-way stages of the project. That's when there's a lot more coordination with agencies like the DOT, with the DEP, County Pinelands Commission, especially in this area, obviously is a big factor. So Pinelands Commission is typically not, it's more of a time commitment than anything, to be able to work through the process with them, to be able to get trails completed. This is a mapping that I put together today to look at the wetland areas of the township. So typically, a lot of times trails are located in these wetland areas because they are publicly owned spaces, which don't require any sort of easements or right-of-way acquisition, but they are also viewed as either open space or recreational areas. But building a trail in these areas tends to be pretty difficult, right, because of the permitting conditions. So we're working through Pinelands areas in southern Camden County right now as a part of the Camden County Link Trail, which will be the central spine of their active transportation network. And this graphic here on the right shows generally what we're trying to do in those wetland areas, and building a boardwalk structure that connects across those wetland areas to mitigate the environmental disturbance and to satisfy the permitting requirements for DEP and Pinelands Commission. And then finally, once the engineering, permitting, and right-of-way acquisition is complete, you actually get into construction, which is the exciting part. And then, of course, once that's complete, ribbon cutting. So that was just to kind of help give you the idea of how you get from the ideas that folks are kicking around right now and getting through the process. One thing that we do look at, I'm not going to go into the details of this, but something that we do consider sometimes when we're doing network analysis or feasibility studies, is we want to be able to quantify the economic impacts, especially if we need to help convince the borough or the county or municipality that this is the right way to go. And this will help you better leverage the outside funding to come in and justify the expenditures that the community wants to undertake, and help sell, especially for some types of grant funding. to be able to show the return on investment that you're getting through the environmental benefits, the transportation benefits, the health benefits in the community. Property values are, it's kind of a mixed bag sometimes because, one of the selling benefits is you're located in an area that has a great active transportation network that can increase the property value of an area. Most of the time it's viewed as positive, sometimes it's viewed as a negative, but that's one of the things that we look at in an economic impact analysis. And then real quick, just the last slide here, I just like to throw this on as a lot of the discussion right now around infrastructure is trying to create more jobs. And a study that was done after the stimulus back in 2008 during the Obama administration, they analyzed the type of work that came out of the stimulus and found out that projects that involved active transportation, such as trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes, per $1 million spent, it created more jobs. And if you think about the rationale behind that is if you have this big giant interstate highway project with massive bridges, a lot of your dollars are going into the materials used to build those kind of structures. Whereas with these smaller, more specialized active transportation projects, the money's actually going more into the labor of building these smaller structures, pavement markings, and that sort of thing. So this is just a good selling point we like to use with elected officials, that active transportation funding means more jobs created for getting more bang for the buck. So that is the end of my presentation, and I think that's a good segue into getting back into Betsy's presentation.
All right, thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. That was good. Yeah, so we'll turn it over to Betsy, and then at the end of Betsy's presentation, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, fingers crossed, everybody.
All right.
Thanks for hanging in there. Matt, thanks for talking LTS. Sorry. Okay, so just briefly, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission is the metropolitan planning organization centered on Greater Philadelphia. So DVRPC has a very regional perspective. We cover 5 counties in Pennsylvania and 4 in New Jersey, including Burlington. And we are run by an 18-member board, and we are responsible for coming up with the fiscally constrained transportation plans in the area, along with the DOTs and the transit agencies. We run a model that helps us understand how people are moving throughout the region. And we do a number of other things related to planning work that that is also part of our mission. So we help members of our board, largely consist of the transit agencies, the departments of transportation, and the counties, look at things like transportation, like smart growth, economic development. We're focused on equity and safety. And among one of the highlights of what we're involved in is the bicycle and pedestrian planning. So I'm glad to be here. And I manage the Office of Transit, Bicycle, and Pedestrian Planning at DVRPC. And several other offices also do work within the realm of bicycle and pedestrian. So there's a lot you can find out on. You're really getting the real me with Wi-Fi coming, the dog. Anyway, we cover a lot of scales. So what we try to do, he'll go to the front door in a second. So we cover a lot of different scales looking at the region. So that's a planning tool on the left. It's our level of traffic stress that's been mentioned before, all the way down to really working and designing and planning real life things that you can experience at the human scale. And we do this so that our member governments and our partners have the tools to be able to plan and do what they want on their own, and we can help facilitate that, as also sort of work more directly at the planning level with at a corridor level or in communities directly where we might be planning with folks. So I have kind of like a representative scale of some of those things. It doesn't cover everything, but I would encourage you to go to our bicycle and pedestrian pages where you can find lots more tools here. But I'm just going to provide an overview. So you've heard several folks mention the level of traffic stress. This is a resource that we created for our partners maybe 2 years ago or so. And it was looking at the street network in our region and coming up with what engineers call a level of traffic stress, which is giving an idea of what it's like to experience bicycling on some of our corridors. And it takes measurements, so it's very data driven. It's based on, our analysis is based on the number of travel lanes on a corridor, the effective vehicular speed, as well as if there are any bike facilities existing on those corridors. So together, those things, as they come together, you can imagine it would become more or less comfortable to bicycle in that corridor. So what resulted is the map on the bottom that gives a sense of what those places are like. And what you're seeing here is what we call our islands. So everything in here, so sort of ignore the colors that you're seeing on the top of the screen. Each of those different colors are level of traffic stress 1 and 2, meaning they're fairly comfortable. If you're at this meeting, you're probably a cyclist, or you would be comfortable on all of these streets, maybe even ride with your families. What the different color means is that you can bike, hopefully you can see my cursor, but you might bike on these green streets and be very comfortable in these streets. But you'll see there is nothing in color on these streets. It means it's difficult to get to these other places. So these islands are not connected. You can't get to all of these places very easily without going on a level of traffic stress 3 or 4. So by publishing this information, it's the tool for lots of our partners to be able to think about lots of things. Somebody mentioned resurfacing earlier. Is this a corridor where there's a gap in connectivity? Is this some place where we need to make connections? Does this grant application make sense? Is it a gap? And if you go to our website to look at level of traffic stress, we've actually done a connectivity analysis where if you toggle through the layers, you might be able to see particular corridors that are LTS 3. That's where we think we have the most opportunity to create change. If you created a bicycle facility or made it more comfortable for cyclists on a LTS 3 corridor, you could then make many more connections. So you could link several islands. So that connectivity analysis and that LTS is something that we hope stakeholders find useful in their own planning. And we're actually working on sort of a 2.0 that shows a couple different analysis connecting it to transit stations and equity component that begins to look at that analysis. And that LTS analysis for cyclists was really a launching point for something else we were doing at the same time, which was trying to take an inventory of sidewalks in the region. So bike facilities is very difficult for a regional agency to maintain, but generally communities love to tell us about bike lanes because it's kudos. So we're able to track those pretty easy. What was really hard is to track sidewalks because it's so fine-tuned. So we gradually were able to get this inventory, and now through our website, you're able to get to our pedestrian portal, what we call it, which has a few different levels. Part of it is information, and part of it is something you can engage in. So this first part of the analysis is about exploring. So this is a glimpse of what you might see on a map, which shows whether or not there are sidewalks, if they're on one side of the street, both sides of the streets, and if there are curb ramps and crosswalks to be able to cross at intersections. So this is really helpful for looking at a particular area. And if you go to that and you see that something is misrepresented in Medford, we actually have an edit tool where you can tell us if we've gotten it wrong. I'm not exactly sure of the lane miles of our region, but it's tremendous. So please correct us on either the bike facilities or the sidewalk facilities if you see something missing. We'd love to know about it. And then the final attribute to that is to be able to plan what kind of connections you might want to use. So by creating your own login, you're able to jump on there and propose connections that you think are really important connections that are missing. So, but this is a very recent, maybe it was in the fall, that this was published. So it's another planning tool for our communities and our partners. Another program that kind of gets at the heart of the communities and working with a particular municipality is a relatively new program for us. It's called Expo, or Experimental Pop-Ups. And we're thrilled to hopefully be able to work with cross-county connections and some opportunities in New Jersey in this. But this really works, we're able to work at a local level with these projects and get at some of the lighter, quicker, cheaper projects. We talked a little bit earlier about capital and the grant funding for that. This is not that. This is the temporary situation of that, to be able to pilot things and demonstrate things. So the Expo program, we're in our first year of what we hope will be an ongoing program to help communities demonstrate these pop-up or demonstration projects. If you've heard, seen, read about tactical urbanism, that's what this has to do with. So generally, the parameters of our program as we're shaping it right now is to do projects that are related to placemaking and transportation. So a sense of community, a sense of purpose, both recreational and transportation, bicycle and pedestrian projects. This first year, we'll work in 3 locations, and we're working in 2 in Pennsylvania and 1 in New Jersey. And what we're hoping for is to be approached by communities with projects that they've already sort of identified through community outreach, that this is something that people want, it's something that's needed, and particularly if they want to demonstrate, we're hoping that is a specific project, it's achievable, and you can get some measurements and have an idea of how successful it was. I love this quote here of one of the partners that we worked on in a project in Narberth, that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. As planners, we're involved in a lot of community meetings. I'm guessing you are too. And that's a really important part of the process, to be able to talk about things. And we see real value in talking and experiencing these things together. So that outreach and that feedback that community members want to give can really sort of be heightened, because they get to experience things in real life rather than seeing something on paper. So Patrick should be in on this picture in the bottom because he was here that day. This is sort of the first project that we got our feet wet with. It was a 1-day pop-up parking protected bike lane in Westchester Borough in Pennsylvania. And we were out at sunup and we got rid of the parking lane. We added tape, we added cones. We printed things out of the office to hold up signs to indicate where people parked. And we were out there giving community surveys and finding out what people thought of this and trying to show people what's possible in the borough. We used that momentum then a few months later, just this last fall, to pilot something in the borough of Narberth in Pennsylvania. It's called Wheels on Windsor. And this was a 2-week pilot to show what a 2-way bike facility would look like in Narberth. Narberth has a lot of 1-way streets, and they have very short blocks, so people bike in both directions, and they wanted to show people what it would be like to actually designate space for that. So fingers crossed, I'm really going to push the limits here and try to show a short video that I think summarizes what it took to and who it took to involve and why they did the project. Just kidding. That's a slide that's coming up. So DVRPC was approached by the Narberth Cycling Club, the Borough Council, and Borough staff in this project. So there were various roles. What DVRPC did as part of the program in this is we came up with a sign and striping plan and sort of all the paintwork that laid out what the Public Works Department would do. And after a day or two, we actually made some tweaks in there. So we advised Public Works, this is how it's working. We got some feedback through the community on slight adjustments, and we're able to do that. So we produced kind of plans like this that aren't traditional engineering plans, or somewhere between a planning and engineering level. We did a community survey where we got 185 responses over that 10-day period. We, DVRPC does a lot of travel monitoring where we put out equipment and we measure how many cars are using a corridor, as well as bikes and pedestrians, and we can take speed counts. So we counted 852 bicyclists using that facility in the week. And then we were able to measure people's responses about whether or not the community wanted to see more pilots. And that was really helpful for Borough Council to know if the community wanted to see more of these projects, and if so, where. Now I'm going to try to show this video. So I need somebody on my screen. I see this lovely person who keeps nodding her head, but I don't see her name. If you could just tell me if you can hear. Can you nod if you can hear when this starts? It's just music.
Yeah, we don't hear any audio.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not hearing the audio.
Okay. I have a plan B.
Okay.
Hear anything?
No. How about plan C?
I have had too many plans for this
Is it
presentation
just
so
music?
far.
It doesn't matter then, right?
And it looks
Well-
like there's going to be an interview there, so
Yeah, there's some pretty good interviews afterwards about.
maybe you can post the link to that video.
I'll post it,
yeah.
and it's on DVRPC. It's just
Okay.
DVRPC /expo. So there's 2 videos on there that I think do a really good job of describing the project. And we are hoping to work with Patrick in a community in New Jersey, and we are thrilled to know about more projects that people want to see and want to get tested on the ground, because we think it's a really great way to start getting more support for bicycle and pedestrian facilities and placemaking by demonstrating what they look like. So we're super excited for that. That's everything that I had that I wanted to present in slide form. But again, DVRPC's bicycle pages and pedestrian pages really has a lot of information that I think you might find useful, and you can dig around in there. And I'm certainly available anytime if you wanted to. Email is probably best, since I didn't know I missed a voicemail.
All right, great. Thank you, Betsy. Just wanted to comment. I think the LTS map and the sidewalk inventory are really good. I think that's very relevant to Medford Township, where we have a lot of planned developments that people feel really comfortable walking and biking around, but they're for the most part separated by county roads or higher traffic roads, and a lot of people are kind of isolated. So those are really good resources, I think, that kind of
Actually,
show.
John, can I
Yeah.
just interrupt you for a second? There was one more thing that I wanted to say, but it wasn't in
Sure.
the PowerPoint. I pulled it up while somebody had asked, the question in the chat was about Medford Lakes. So I pulled up the LTS, if you can see this. So I described those islands and what it's like when things are connected. Medford Lakes is this green section right here. And I don't think you have to be a planner or an engineer to see that that looks really different than what's around it. The street network, those blocks are shorter, they're all connected. You can make a left or a right and a straight turn, every couple of 100 feet. It's really easy. So it kind of tells you something about the street network, about why you might see so many kids in some areas and not so much in the other area. So sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
John. I
no,
just
that's a
thought that
great,
that
that's a
illustrates
great
it.
point. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I know it's after 8 and there are a couple of questions. So if anyone has to drop off, I understand. But so one question from Bruce is that I think this is directed to Cross County Connection. Someone mentioned that there are 40 communities in South Jersey that participate, which means that a lot of others don't. And can you comment on whether this is due to a lack of knowledge about the programs, or is there resistance to participating? And if there is resistance, what groups does it come from? Is it, elected officials or professional staff or development community? And if there is resistance to some of these programs that are available, what are the best ways to overcome it?
So before anybody answers that, I'd like to acknowledge that Chris Knoll, our township engineer, and our township planner, Michelle Taylor, are both on the call, and welcome them to also, share their thoughts and ideas.
Yep. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.
All right, I guess I'll start with this
Thanks,
one.
Chris and Michelle, for joining too. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. The first part of the question, yes, all of it. It's lack of knowledge, and then it's often resistance from either all of those parties or one or a few of them. And generally what it is that lack of knowledge. So we try our best to educate people in those positions and kind of remove some of the misperceptions that center around complete streets. The big ones being around liability and then cost. Removing that sense that it's binding them to put a bike lane on every street in every project. That's not true. And that they have to spend a ton of money. So that's one way. It's good to have public forums to discuss complete streets like this. The worst way to start that kind of conversation, though, is in your typical kind of municipal hearing kind of public meeting setting. So setting up some sort of thing like an open house is a great way to kind of engage in these conversations. If a town is interested and they're really committing to this sort of process, if they engage in the process of having a bicycle pedestrian master plan or a mobility plan that Matt mentioned, that's a good opportunity to educate everybody. And then if you do get a municipality on board, what Betsy was showing you with the expo projects, that's about the best way you can ever educate the public, engineers, and show them the sky is not falling if they put in a two-way protected bike lane on a one-way street. So it's just trying a series of ways. It's persistence is a way to do it, but the start is to provide resources, provide knowledge to kind of overcome a lot of those misperceptions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
Another question, this is, I guess, a general question for anyone, but I think this may relate to the NJDOT Complete Streets model policy. But with respect to project checklists, I think that would be a list of requirements for complete streets that would go with public improvement projects. I think that's what you're referring to, Bruce. Are they typically embedded in ordinances so that they're required, or is it more common to have them as a voluntary measure? And do community leaders prefer for these measures to be voluntary to allow for discretion?
Yes, they can be done through ordinances. It's not as common in New Jersey, but it is growing because of the lack of teeth that the prior format of just merely adopting a resolution of support provided. But there are towns who have done just a resolution of support, but they have a crafted policy that is very clear, and they have an implementation plan. So the answer is yes and no. Ordinances are about the best thing you can do if you really want to make the change. And what, again, the discretion is built into complete streets. It's not the discretion of like, do we apply it here? Just by reviewing it and seeing that maybe it's not the right opportunity to not provide these types of facilities, you're still doing your due diligence and going through the complete streets checklist process. So that's kind of what I would say about that. But generally, yeah, it's usually a policy that is created. Just like, if you have a plan, you don't necessarily have to follow the plan to like the letter of the law. You do a feasibility study. You figure out, okay, that might not work. This works. And then you work on it like that through the permitting process and things like that. So it doesn't bind you necessarily to put something on the ground. It just binds you to consider putting something on the ground and at least go through the process.
Right. Okay.
To add on to what you were saying, Patrick, I think some municipalities, not in South Jersey, but in other areas in New Jersey, have done this now where they, take the complete streets checklist and just adopt that as an ordinance separate from the complete streets policy. Like they adopt the policy as a resolution, but then to actually, like really require that the engineer or the planner considers complete streets, they adopt just the checklist as an ordinance. So it's actually required, unlike the resolution where it's not really required. So they just adopt that one part as an ordinance. If you have a mayor that wants to consider that, or someone that wants to consider that, that's something that you could also do.
Yeah, and I would consider that a best practice. Thanks, Eric.
Okay, great. And I don't see any more questions in the window, but I did have one question. I guess it's a general question, but for anyone, Eric mentioned placemaking, and I think that's really important in certain areas. We have a shopping center at the Taunton and Tuckerton intersection that's, there's a redevelopment plan that covers it. I think that's an important place. I mean, there's a gazebo there. There used to be live music. There's the historic village district, the commercial district in the heart of Medford, I think is the most important, being surrounded by parks and, denser development. And if someone could just comment a little bit more on, what placemaking means and what kind of benefits that would have to a place where you want to encourage people, foot traffic and encourage people to mingle, and where foot traffic is important to the success of a business district.
Yeah, I can speak to that. It's absolutely important to help set your community apart from other communities. I guess I'll take a step back real quick. Placemaking, for people that aren't familiar with it, is creating a place in the public realm where people can gather, where it's just a common space, and it's a place where people are excited to be. And I'll give you an example of something that we're trying to do right now in a suburban area on the Pennsylvania side. Is that we're trying to find a place to have an outdoor public meeting, and this particular area did not have a public space in order to do that. We were trying to find a place where we could passively engage with folks as they are going about their business, say on a Saturday morning. They didn't have a local farmers market. They didn't have a park where a lot of people mingle. They had a local grocery store. They have a shopping mall, but those are private places, and we were not able to, in their terms, solicit in those areas for public outreach. So this particular community did not have that placemaking element where a place where public can gather. So that's absolutely important in the identity of your community, and in thinking about a mobility plan for your community. Where are those places you want that are already have that placemaking element? Where are the places you want those to be? And then how do you connect to those locations, point A to point B, from residential areas, business districts, etc.
I have a question, John, if I could jump in here. One of the things that I find in discussing, complete streets and bike lanes and stuff, there tends to be kind of a focus on cycling, that when you talk about this stuff, people who aren't necessarily in favor of it think of it in terms of the spandex clad, bike cycling groups. And, I really try to, that's why, partly that's why we frame this as, using the term complete streets, because I think it's really important to people understand this more to a holistic, standpoint. But my contention is with some of the business districts. John mentioned Taunton and Tuckerton, we have Ironstone, Main Street. My contention is that some of these areas have failed or done really poorly because over the years we have ignored these issues or haven't implemented some, best practices. So I'm curious, if you guys have, access, there's certainly, I guess case studies and examples of projects you've been involved with, but also is there data that supports, implementing full-scale complete streets plans that can actually revive, business districts that haven't been doing well? And that's open to anybody.
They're out there. Yeah, there's a lot of studies on the economic impacts of biking and walking infrastructure, including economic recovery and business, and encouraging, small businesses especially really benefit from encouraging biking and walking because they find that people who walk and bike to stores tend to come more often. Rather than doing one bulk shop, they come and they do a couple little trips and they become more regular visitors. But there are studies out there. I don't know, Matt from NV5 might have some more specific examples because we don't really work on large scale projects like that. But I know of some studies and track them down.
Yeah, I can put some links in the chat box that are kind of more driven towards corridor studies, looking at kind of, for example, we did one for the East Coast Greenway in the Delaware Valley a few years ago. But yeah, I can send some studies that others have done. I can send those to John. I'd have to get those pulled up, and he can send those out to the group later on. But I mean, it's absolutely been proven that, like Patrick is exactly right, where you make a lot more smaller trips to local businesses, and you're able to, this is kind of tied into the placemaking element where you're able to hit up a couple of businesses at a time. You're not just parking in a giant parking lot and going one place at a time. And it just creates it more of a social factor to it too, where you have groups that go out and ride together. That's the thing that my wife and I do all the time is we just get on the bike, and we're not putting Lycra shorts on and going riding 35 miles and trying to keep an 18-mile-an-hour pace. We just want to get out on a beautiful day and go for a ride and grab a brew at the local brewery and check out the shops nearby. So those they definitely go, the placemaking, the bicycle pedestrian mobility, they definitely go hand in hand. And if that's the kind of community you want to create, you need to plan for it, and it can definitely help turn an area around. I'm not going to say it's the end all be all that you put a bike ped plan in place and it's going to turn the community around in 5 years. It takes a lot of different efforts to revitalize an area, but it can definitely be a big piece and one piece of the puzzle.
While I have the floor here, let me just ask one more question, and then I'll be quiet. Famous last words for those who know.
Oh, good questions, Kevin.
Yeah. So John, I'm going to ask one more question here, which is the question of COVID and how that has changed things. I mean, one of the things we saw during the past year is just exponential, growth in the number of people on bikes and walking, people on motorized scooters or electric scooters and electric devices. So, and I'm sure for all of you who are working in this, you guys weren't anticipating that, but what do you see that potentially, is this a transformative moment, or is it going to pass in terms of more people working at home? So a lot more people in their neighborhoods walking around, riding, et cetera.
I guess I can start. I'm sorry, good.
The one thing I meant to mention earlier that I forgot to, I'm glad this got brought up now, is the proliferation of e-bikes and seeing more and more people, actually replacing, even in suburban areas, replacing their automobiles with e-bikes. And potentially, like a 2-car household going down to a 1-car household because one member of the family now has a cargo bike and they can go run errands, they can take the kids to school, and still having the car for those longer trips. You're starting to see that creep in now. It's not a giant wave yet, but I haven't met a person that has got on an e-bike and just said, wow, this is amazing, this is great. My wife just got one about 4 months ago. She now commutes to work on it. And just, it's amazing. It's just this small little fold up bike. It's got a little motor on it. And it just, in her words, it makes the city seem smaller because you can just reach so many places so quickly now, and you don't have to worry about parking. It's a big deal. I think that the e-bike thing, there needs to be a bigger push for that. And there's talk in Congress right now. There's a bill in Congress now where there's talk of a 30% credit for electric bikes. So that has the potential to be huge. And there's a lot of venture capital going into electric bike companies. So I think that's the next big thing, is the electric bikes and increasing the range of folks, and getting that kind of higher speed. That they don't go fast, they go, the fastest class 1, class 2 go up to 20 miles an hour. So it's still a bicycling speed. It's not like a motorcycle or anything like that, but it just helps get over that range anxiety, if you will, and helps just make a bigger area to which one can bike.
Yeah, I see the Goldmans just posted that they're getting an electric bike, and we definitely I've seen a lot more of them around Medford and the electric scooters and stuff. So
not with e-bikes, but there's people I've come across that I wouldn't expect to go out and buy a bike, but they're now using it to get out and around their neighborhood, maybe because they're not getting to the gym. And my hope is that these people want to bike to places other than just their neighborhood streets, and they become advocates for complete streets because of that. And then second, Eric had a slide about reallocating street space. We often, prior to this, just thought of complete streets in the realm of transportation, accommodating people for mobility purposes. But the idea is, you think about complete streets in terms of complete uses. What are you really maximizing the value of your streets? And I think that's something people are seeing pretty dramatically in a lot of places, how you can repurpose streets to create economic activity. And maybe it'll lead to more maybe weekends where streets are shut down to let restaurants kind of spill out into the street, more expanded sidewalks. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be a big takeaway from this. I expect to see some of that continue in places. If it wasn't done in downtown Medford, maybe it's something that should be considered. It'll probably be here to stay in Philadelphia, probably in Collingswood. Just the idea of allowing the streets to be something more than just a conveyance of vehicles.
We are in the process of doing some analysis. I don't think it's published yet. It's a retail analysis during the pandemic, and it shows kind of the scale of how things have changed during the pandemic. And in some cases, in some communities where they've closed down roads and added more outdoor dining space and looked for some other opportunities to do things during the pandemic. And what they've seen is there's a much greater pull geographically from where they're pulling, and they're pulling people with money. So I can pass that along when that's published too.
Yeah.
That would be great. Yeah.
I used to live in Medford Lakes, and I know the area a little well, but I live in Philadelphia now, and I can tell you, like, if Iron Forge wanted to close down the street and have like an event, I'd be there in a second. So that kind of stuff.
Count on it. Awesome. That's a good discussion. Thanks, Kevin, for bringing that up and for all the responses. I think at this point, we should probably let everyone go. It's been a great hour and a half. I wish we could spend another hour and a half talking about these issues. And again, I want to thank all of the speakers for their input and those of you who asked questions. This has really been a good conversation. I hope that we can keep the conversation going here in Medford and also in surrounding towns. I mean, surrounding towns, Mount Laurel and Evesham and Lumberton, and also have these same issues that need to be addressed. So, and I will post these links and over time some of the things that have been, some of the studies that have been talked about on the Facebook page, Complete Streets for Medford Township. So if you follow that page, I do try to, Kevin and I try to post regularly on there with some of this information. So, so thank you everyone. Thanks for coming out, and look forward to continuing the conversation.